Hello there, and welcome to Midnight Geography. Tonight, we'll drift into the quiet truths written across our planet's surface. Geography is Earth's autobiography, written in stone and water, sand and ice. It's the story of how time and elements conspire to create the world beneath our feet. A world where mountains grow in darkness and rivers disappear into earth, where permanence and change exist in the same breath. If you enjoy these peaceful geographical explorations, consider liking and subscribing. It helps other curious minds find their way here too. But for now, let's begin. Lake Baikal in Siberia holds more water than all 5 of North America's Great Lakes combined. This ancient rift in the Earth's crust has been gathering water for 25 million years, creating the deepest and oldest lake on our planet. Its waters plunge down 1,642 meters into darkness, holding 1/5 of all the fresh water on Earth that isn't frozen. In winter, the lake transforms into a different world entirely. The ice becomes so clear you can see 40 meters down, as if walking on glass above an abyss. Methane bubbles rise from the lake bed and freeze in perfect spheres, suspended like pearls in the transparent ice. The local Buryat people call it the Sacred Sea, and perhaps they understand something science cannot fully capture, that some places on Earth hold more than just water. They hold time itself, preserved in liquid form, every drop a memory of rain that fell before humans walked upright. Just 600 miles west, the Sayan Mountains cradle the geographical center of Asia. Here, in the Republic of Tuva, one of Russia's most remote regions, stands a simple monument marking this profound yet invisible truth. Tuva itself remains one of the least visited places on Earth, a land where throat singers still practice their ancient art and where the landscape seems untouched by the modern world. The monument sits quietly, unassuming, marking a mathematical certainty on a continent of uncertainties. Few travelers ever reach this spot, where Asia balances on an invisible fulcrum. The journey there takes you through valleys where eagles circle endlessly and where the horizon seems to stretch beyond comprehension. It's a reminder that the center of things is often empty, quiet, and overlooked. A geographical truth that applies to more than just continents. The Richat structure in Mauritania presents itself from space as a giant eye staring back at the cosmos. This perfect bullseye spans 30 miles across the Sahara, its concentric rings of ancient rock creating one of Earth's most mysterious formations. Once thought to be the scar of a meteorite impact, geologists now believe it's the eroded remains of a dome pushed up from Earth's depths millions of years ago. Each ring represents different types of rock, eroding at different rates, creating this hypnotic pattern visible only from great height. Astronauts use it as a landmark, this eye in the desert that never blinks. The local Berber people have known of it for generations, though from ground level, you'd never guess you were walking through something so perfectly circular. The desert winds carry sand across its surface endlessly, slowly revealing and concealing its ancient stones like a planet-sized secret, written in a language we're only beginning to understand. Some have even wondered if this could be the location of the mythical Atlantis, though the rocks tell a different story, one of geological patience and the art of erosion. Chile's Atacama Desert harbors valleys where rain has never been recorded in human history. Some weather stations here have never measured a single drop of precipitation, making this the driest place on Earth. The soil is so devoid of moisture that NASA uses it to test Mars rovers, finding it more similar to Martian soil than any other place on our planet. In certain areas, even bacteria cannot survive. The ground is utterly sterile, a preview of what Earth might look like without water. Yet this seemingly dead landscape holds surprises. Ancient microbes sleep in the salt deposits, waiting for the rain that comes once every decade or century, or perhaps never. When those rare drops do fall, the desert explodes briefly into color. Dormant seeds that have waited years suddenly bloom in purple and pink carpets that last just days before returning to dust. The absence of water here is so complete that mummies found in the desert are better preserved than those in Egypt's tombs. Beneath the Atacama lies another wonder, the world's largest underground copper deposit at Chuquicamata. This hole in the earth has grown so vast it can be seen from orbit, a spiral descending into the planet like an inverted mountain. Trucks the size of houses crawl along its terraced roads, looking like toys from the rim. The pit reaches down 850 meters, and every year it grows deeper, wider, hungrier. The copper pulled from this single hole has wired much of the modern world. At night, the lights from the mining operation create an eerie glow visible from space, as if the earth itself were bleeding light. The scale defies comprehension. Standing at its edge, you feel the vertigo not just of depth, but of human ambition carved into stone. The Danakil Depression in Ethiopia exists as Earth's preview of an alien world. This basin sits 125 meters below sea level, where temperatures regularly soar above 50 degrees Celsius, making it one of the hottest places year-round on our planet. The landscape here seems borrowed from another world entirely. Acid pools bubble in greens and yellows that shouldn't exist in nature, while sulfur formations create miniature yellow mountains that grow and crumble daily. Salt formations stretch to the horizon like frozen waves, and active volcanoes leak lava into this already hellish scene. The Afar people somehow call this home, harvesting salt as their ancestors have for centuries, walking across ground that burns through shoes, breathing air that shimmers with heat. Scientists come here to study extremophiles, life forms that shouldn't exist but do, thriving in conditions that would kill most organisms in seconds. It's a place where Earth shows us what it's capable of when all restraints are removed. Norway's coastline performs a geographic magic trick that defies simple measurement. If you were to stretch out all its fjords and trace every inlet and island, the line would wrap around the equator more than twice. This seemingly impossible length, over 100,000 kilometers when fully measured, exists because the coast fractures into countless fingers of sea reaching into land, and land reaching into sea. The fjords themselves are scars from ancient glaciers, valleys carved so deep that the ocean rushed in to fill them when the ice retreated. Some plunge over a kilometer deep, their dark waters holding secrets from when the world was frozen. The coastline changes with every tide, every storm, creating new patterns in an endless geometric progression. From space, Norway's edge looks like the Earth is dissolving into the sea, or perhaps the sea is becoming land, the boundary between them lost in infinite complexity. The island of Socotra floats in isolation off Yemen's coast, a fragment of ancient Gondwana that broke away 18 million years ago. This separation created an evolutionary laboratory where life took different paths than anywhere else on Earth. A third of its plant species exist nowhere else, not similar species, not related species, but completely unique forms of life. The dragon's blood trees look like giant umbrellas turned inside out, bleeding crimson resin when cut. Desert roses grow with swollen trunks like botanical sculptures. The isolation is so complete that the island's only native mammals are bats. Walking through Socotra's landscapes feels like stepping into Earth's rough draft, where evolution tried different ideas before settling on the forms we know. The local Sakatri people speak a language without writing, as isolated linguistically as the island is biologically. Canada's Hudson Bay harbors one of Earth's gravitational anomalies. Here, you weigh slightly less than anywhere else on the planet, a lingering effect from ice sheets 2 miles thick that pressed down on this land 20,000 years ago. The Earth's crust, compressed for millennia, is still slowly rebounding, rising about a centimeter per year. This patient return to form affects everything. The bay is gradually shrinking, beaches appear where none existed before, and gravity itself remains weakened. Scientists measuring this anomaly discovered that the missing gravity comes from 2 sources. The rebounding crust and deep mantle flows far beneath the surface. It's a place where the planet remembers its past physically, where ancient ice still shapes present reality. The indigenous Cree people have stories about the land rising from the water, oral histories that align perfectly with what geologists have only recently measured. The Mariana Trench plunges so deep into Earth that Mount Everest could be inverted into it and still leave more than a mile of water above its peak. This crack in the Pacific seafloor descends 11 kilometers down into pressures that would crush most submarines like paper. Yet life thrives here in the eternal darkness. Xenophyophores, single-celled organisms the size of your fist, drift through the black water. Sea cucumbers process the marine snow that falls endlessly from above, the remains of creatures that lived and died in the sunlit waters miles overhead. The pressure at the bottom equals about 1,000 atmospheres, the weight of 50 jumbo jets pressing on every square inch. Water itself behaves differently here, compressed by its own weight. Sound travels strangely in the deep, and the few expeditions that have reached the bottom report an overwhelming sense of being on another planet entirely, though they're actually closer to Earth's center than almost anywhere else we can reach. Russia spans such impossible width that when the sun rises in Kaliningrad, it's already setting in Kamchatka. 11 time zones stretch across this single country, more than any other nation. This means that New Year's Eve in Russia lasts 11 hours, celebrated again and again as midnight sweeps across each zone. The Trans-Siberian Railway takes 7 days to cross this expanse, passing through landscapes that change from European forests to Asian steppes to Pacific shores. In the middle zones, there are places so remote that no accurate maps existed until satellite imagery. Some Siberian villages are closer to the International Space Station when it passes overhead than they are to their own capital. The sheer scale creates administrative impossibilities. Meetings scheduled across the country require some participants to join in the middle of their night. It's a nation where geography overwhelms human attempts at unity, where distance itself becomes a defining characteristic. The Dead Sea continues its ancient disappearance, dropping 1.2 meters every year. This shrinking reveals landscapes that haven't seen sunlight for centuries. Salt formations like frozen waterfalls, caves lined with crystals, and beaches that are more salt than sand. Sinkholes open without warning as underground salt deposits dissolve, swallowing sections of road, groves of date palms, and sometimes entire buildings. The water itself is so dense with minerals that humans cannot sink, forcing swimmers into an involuntary float. No fish survive here, no plants grow in its waters, hence its ominous name. Yet the minerals that make it deadly to most life make it therapeutic to human skin. The mud from its bottom has been prized since Cleopatra's time. As it shrinks, the Dead Sea becomes saltier still, approaching the point where even the extremophile bacteria that give some pools their red color will no longer survive. Scientists predict that, without intervention, this ancient sea will become a salt flat within decades. Mount Thor on Baffin Island presents Earth's greatest vertical drop, a cliff face that doesn't just fall straight down but actually overhangs, leaning out at 105 degrees like a massive wave of granite frozen mid-crash. The wall drops 250 meters of pure vertical granite, a height that challenges comprehension. Climbers who attempt it must sleep hanging in space, suspended from the overhanging rock with nothing but air below for nearly a mile. The mountain stands in Auyutuk National Park, a name that means the land that never melts in Inuktitut, though climate change challenges that ancient truth. In summer, the midnight sun circles the horizon, casting shadows that wheel around the mountain's base like a giant sundial. In winter, the polar night brings months of darkness, and the aurora borealis dances above the peak. The rock itself is some of Earth's oldest, formed when the planet was young and still learning to be solid. The Sargasso Sea exists without shores, defined not by land but by ocean currents. 4 major currents create a gyre that holds this sea within a sea. 2 million square miles of water in the middle of the Atlantic. Columbus's crews feared it, watching their ships slow in the dense mats of sargassum seaweed that give the sea its name. These floating forests of golden algae support an entire ecosystem. Baby sea turtles hide here. Eels come from rivers thousands of miles away to breed, and species exist that are found nowhere else. The water is startlingly clear and blue, nutrient poor, but full of life adapted to scarcity. Plastic now gathers here too, trapped by the same currents that define the sea, creating an unwanted modern addition to this ancient system. Ships report that crossing the Sargasso feels like entering a different ocean entirely. The water changes color, the waves calm, and the floating sargassum creates the illusion of sailing through golden fields. Mount Roraima rises from the Venezuelan rainforest like something from another time. Its flat summit, shrouded perpetually in clouds, inspired Arthur Conan Doyle to imagine dinosaurs still living on its unreachable top. While no dinosaurs remain, what does exist there is hardly less remarkable. The summit hosts ecosystems isolated for millions of years, evolved in ways found nowhere else. Plants grow in patterns that seem to follow different rules. Many species here are endemic, unique to this single mountaintop. Rain falls almost daily, creating the highest waterfall in the world as water plunges from Roraima's edge. The indigenous Pimon people consider it sacred, the stump of a mighty tree that once held all the fruits and vegetables of the world. Climbers who reach the top describe walking through clouds into a primordial world where every pool holds species unknown to science, and where the borders between earth and sky blur into mist. The eye of the Sahara spreads across Mauritania's desert like a 50-kilometer wide target. From ground level, you'd never know you were walking through something so perfectly circular. It's only from space that the pattern becomes clear. Originally thought to be a meteor impact crater, geologists now believe it's the eroded heart of an ancient geological dome. The rings are different types of rock, each eroding at its own pace, creating this bullseye pattern that seems too perfect for nature. Some have speculated it could be the remains of Atlantis, though the rocks tell a different story, one that spans hundreds of millions of years. Astronauts have used it as a landmark since the earliest space missions. This eye in the desert that seems to gaze back at them. Local nomads have crossed it for generations, following ancient paths that wind between the ridges, unaware they're walking through one of Earth's most recognizable features when seen from above. Lake Vostok lies sealed beneath 4 kilometers of Antarctic ice, hidden from the world for 15 million years. This underground lake, the size of Lake Ontario, exists in permanent darkness at temperatures below freezing, yet remains liquid due to pressure and geothermal heat. When Russian scientists finally drilled through to it, they found water that had been isolated since before humans evolved. The lake likely contains life forms that have evolved in complete isolation, possibly unlike anything else on Earth. The water is supersaturated with oxygen, levels that would be toxic to most modern life. It's a time capsule of ancient Earth, preserved in liquid form. The drilling had to be done with extreme care to avoid contamination. Introducing modern microbes could destroy an ecosystem millions of years in the making. What lives in Vostok's dark waters remains largely mystery, a secret Earth has kept since Antarctica was green. The Amazon River flows for 4,000 miles through Brazil without a single bridge crossing it. This seems impossible for one of Earth's mightiest rivers, but the Amazon's scale and its route through sparsely populated rainforest make bridges unnecessary and impractical. The river is so wide in places that you cannot see the opposite shore. During flood season, it spreads up to 40 kilometers wide, creating a moving sea of brown water, carrying more water than the next 7 largest rivers combined. Trees stand half-submerged for months, fish swim through the forest canopy, and pink dolphins hunt where jaguars walked weeks before. The lack of bridges means that crossing the Amazon requires boats or ferries, journeys that can take hours. Communities on opposite banks might be neighbors on a map, but strangers in reality, separated by a river that's more like a flowing ocean. Madagascar broke away from Africa 165 million years ago, then from India 88 million years ago, creating an island laboratory for evolution. This isolation produced a biological treasure trove where 90% of species exist nowhere else on Earth. Lemurs evolved to fill niches occupied by monkeys elsewhere. Chameleons reached their greatest diversity. Half the world's species live on this single island. Baobab trees grow in forests that seem planted upside down, their massive trunks storing water for the dry season. The island's separation happened before many modern animal groups evolved, which is why Madagascar has no native cats, dogs, deer, or antelopes. Instead, fossas hunt through the forests. Tenrecs fill the role of hedgehogs and shrews, and the now extinct elephant birds laid eggs larger than any dinosaur. Even Madagascar's landscapes seem otherworldly. Stone forests, where limestone pinnacles create vertical mazes, and red earth that makes the island bleed into the ocean during rains. The Namib Desert's sand dunes sing when the conditions are right. These ancient dunes, some of the tallest on Earth, produce low-frequency rumbles that travel for miles across the landscape. The sound happens when sand grains of just the right size and dryness avalanche down the steep faces, each grain vibrating against its neighbors in a chain reaction of sound. Scientists have found that the singing requires precise conditions. The sand must be extremely dry, the grains must be polished smooth by centuries of wind, and they must be uniform in size. Not all dunes can sing. It's a rare ability found in only a few dozen places worldwide. The Namib's dunes are also among Earth's oldest, some sand grains having blown here 5 million years ago. The desert meets the Atlantic Ocean directly, creating the skeleton coast where seal colonies live at the edge of a desert, sustained by the cold Benguela current that brings fish to waters beside burning sand. Point Nemo in the Pacific Ocean marks the most remote location from any land on Earth's surface. This oceanic pole of inaccessibility lies so far from anywhere that the closest humans are often astronauts passing overhead in the International Space Station, orbiting 400 kilometers above. The nearest land, Ducie Island, Motu Nui, and Maher Island all sit roughly 2,688 kilometers away. Ships rarely pass through these waters. There's no reason to be here unless you're deliberately trying to be nowhere. The ocean here reaches depths of about 4 kilometers, and marine life is surprisingly scarce. The waters are too far from land-based nutrients, creating what oceanographers call an ocean desert. Space agencies use Point Nemo as a spacecraft cemetery, deliberately crashing satellites and space stations here where they can harm no one. Somewhere beneath these waves lie the remains of the Mir space station and hundreds of satellites resting in Earth's most remote graveyard. The isolation is so complete that the ocean here has barely been studied. We know more about some places on Mars than we do about Point Nemo. Finland contains 188,000 lakes, a landscape where water and land engage in an eternal negotiation about boundaries. For every 26 people in Finland, there's a lake, though the Finnish word for them, järvi, captures something the English lake misses, something about their integration into the national soul. These lakes formed when glaciers retreated, leaving depressions that filled with the purest water in Europe. In summer, the lakes become mirrors for the white nights when the sun barely sets. In winter, they transform into highways of ice, strong enough to support cars, and even temporary roads marked with small pine trees. The lakes connect through streams and rivers in an intricate network, water finding its way from lake to lake like thoughts connecting in a dreaming mind. Some Finns spend their entire summers moving between lakes, each one offering different fish, different light, different silence. The country has more water than land in some regions, creating a geography that's half liquid, where the distinction between island and mainland becomes philosophical rather than practical. Mexico's Cave of Crystals harbors formations that challenge belief. Discovered only in the year 2000, 300 meters below the Chihuahuan Desert, selenite crystals here have grown to impossible sizes, some reaching 12 meters long and weighing 55 tons. These are the largest crystals ever found on Earth, grown over 500,000 years in conditions so perfect they seem designed by nature as an experiment in patience. The cave maintained a temperature of 58 degrees Celsius with 99% humidity for hundreds of millennia, the crystals growing atom by atom in mineral-rich water. Humans can only survive inside for minutes without protective equipment. The heat and humidity are so extreme that lungs can fill with fluid, literally drowning visitors in air. Scientists working here must wear suits filled with ice. When pumping stopped and the cave reflooded, the crystals returned to their slow growth, adding perhaps a molecule's width each year. It's a place that reminds us that Earth creates its most beautiful things in places we were never meant to see, under conditions we were never meant to survive. Australia stretches wider than the moon itself, a fact that rearranges our sense of celestial scale. From Perth to Sydney, the continent spans 4,000 kilometers, while our moon measures only 3,474 kilometers across. This means if you could place the moon on Australia, its edges wouldn't reach the coasts. This vastness contains deserts larger than many countries, single cattle stations bigger than some European nations. The interior is so empty that there are places where you could walk for weeks without crossing a road. Yet this enormity is inhabited by fewer people than live in Texas. The space between things in Australia, between towns, between water sources, between shade trees, has shaped everything about the country, from its culture to its evolution. Animals here learned to hop rather than run, conserving energy across the vast distances. Plants learn to survive on almost nothing, waiting years between rains. The sheer scale makes Australia feel less like a country and more like a planet unto itself, complete with its own unique life forms and its own red center that glows like Mars at sunset. Utah's Pando Forest keeps a secret that reshapes our understanding of what constitutes an individual life. What appears to be a forest of 47,000 aspen trees is actually a single organism, one male quaking aspen that has been cloning itself for possibly 80,000 years. Every tree shares identical DNA, connected through a root system that spans 106 acres. In autumn, the entire forest changes color in perfect synchrony, a single organism's response to cooling temperatures. Pando, Latin for eye spread, weighs an estimated 6,000 metric tons, making it one of the heaviest organisms on Earth. Each trunk lives for about 130 years before dying and being replaced by a new shoot from the ancient roots. The organism has survived ice ages, droughts, and volcanic eruptions, continuously regenerating itself. Scientists studying Pando have found that different sections of the forest are different ages, like looking at one creature's growth rings spread across a landscape. It's both immortal and constantly dying, both individual and multitude, a living paradox that has been quietly growing since before humans developed agriculture. Iceland grows wider each year, pulled apart by the forces that created it. The North American and Eurasian tectonic plates meet here, or rather, they're unmeeting, separating at about 2 centimeters annually, roughly the rate fingernails grow. This rifting is visible at Thingvellir, where you can walk between continents, though the gap is more subtle than dramatic. The island itself is younger than many species, only 18 million years old, practically newborn in geological terms. This youth and constant growth make Iceland Earth's largest laboratory for watching geology happen in real time. New land emerges regularly. The island of Surtsey appeared from the ocean in 1963, scientists watching an island being born. Volcanoes erupt with such regularity that Icelanders have learned to live with them like difficult neighbors. The ground steams with geothermal activity, turning the entire island into a natural hot spring. Iceland exists in a state of becoming, never quite finished with its own creation, adding new rock to its shores, while glaciers carve away at its center. The Kerguelen Plateau lies hidden beneath the Indian Ocean, a lost microcontinent 3 times the size of Japan. This vast underwater plateau once stood above sea level, a temperate landmass with forests and rivers, now submerged 1 to 2 kilometers beneath the waves. It's one of Earth's most isolated features, located halfway between Africa, Australia, and Antarctica. The only parts still above water are the Kerguelen Islands, which French explorers called the Desolation Islands, where winds blow constantly at hurricane force. Scientists drilling into the plateau have found evidence of ancient forests, proof that this was once a very different place. The submersion happened gradually as the plateau cooled and sank, its forests slowly drowning over millions of years. Now it affects ocean currents in ways we're only beginning to understand, creating upwellings that feed vast populations of marine life. Whales gather here to feed on krill that bloom in the nutrient-rich waters above the plateau. It's a ghost continent, haunting the ocean with its presence, affecting weather patterns and currents from its grave beneath the waves. Bolivia's Salar de Uyuni transforms with the seasons from a crystalline desert to the world's largest mirror. During the dry season, the salt flat's surface forms hexagonal patterns stretching to the horizon, each polygon the result of salt crystallizing as water evaporates. The flatness is so perfect that satellites use it to calibrate their instruments. When rain comes, A thin layer of water turns the entire 10,582 square kilometer expanse into a reflection so perfect that sky and earth become indistinguishable. Flamingos walk across this mirror, appearing to stride through clouds. The sight disorients and enchants, creating a world where up and down lose meaning. Beneath the salt lies half the world's lithium reserves, the mineral that powers our phones and electric cars. Islands of ancient coral reefs dot the salt flat, covered in giant cacti that grow a centimeter per year, some over 1,200 years old. At night, the stars reflect in the water-covered salt, creating the illusion of floating in space. Local Aymara people tell stories of gods walking across the salt, and seeing it, you understand why divinity might choose such a place to touch Earth. The Ganges Delta spreads across Bangladesh and India like Earth's largest river-drawn map, constantly rewriting itself with each monsoon. Covering 59,000 square kilometers, this vast wetland is the world's largest river delta, where the Ganges, Brahmaputra, and Meghna rivers surrender their waters to the Bay of Bengal. The delta is so flat that high tide pushes salt water 100 kilometers inland. During monsoon season, almost the entire delta floods, becoming a vast inland sea dotted with villages on stilts. The soil here is among Earth's most fertile, rebuilt annually by fresh sediment from the Himalayas. 300 million people live in this amphibious world, more than the entire United States population, adapted to a landscape that's neither fully land nor water. Tigers swim between islands in the Sundarbans. River dolphins navigate channels that didn't exist last year and won't exist next year. The delta moves constantly. Islands appear and disappear, rivers jump their channels, and the coastline advances and retreats in an endless dance with the sea. Mount Chimborazo in Ecuador holds a geographic distinction that defies intuition. Its summit is the farthest point from Earth's center, despite being over 2,500 meters shorter than Everest. This happens because Earth isn't a perfect sphere, but bulges at the equator, pushed outward by its own rotation. Chimborazo sits almost directly on the equator, riding this bulge into space. Standing on its summit, you're about 2 kilometers farther from Earth's center than someone atop Everest, and closer to the stars than anywhere else on the planet. The mountain rises so high that its upper slopes exist in permanent ice age conditions, while its base touches tropical cloud forests. Alexander von Humboldt climbed here in 1802, reaching higher than any human had climbed before, though he didn't make the summit. He discovered that plants and animals lived in distinct zones based on altitude, revolutionizing our understanding of ecology. Local indigenous peoples considered Chimborazo sacred, believing it was male while the nearby Tungurahua volcano was female, their relationship playing out in eruptions and avalanches. Egypt's Qattara Depression could theoretically become a sea. This vast basin drops to 133 meters below sea level, covering an area the size of Lake Ontario. Only 55 kilometers of land separate it from the Mediterranean. Engineers have proposed canals or tunnels to flood it, creating an inland sea that would change Egypt's climate, generating hydroelectric power as water pours in. The depression formed through wind erosion and salt weathering over millions of years, carved from the landscape grain by grain. During World War II, its soft sand and salt marshes made it impassable to armies, shaping the battles of El Alamein. Now it's one of Earth's most lifeless places, too salty for most life, too dry for permanent water. Gazelles sometimes venture to its edges, and migrating birds cross it quickly, but little else survives here. The depression continues to grow, wind still carrying away sand and salt, slowly carving this wound in the desert deeper. If sea levels rise enough, nature might accomplish what engineers have only dreamed, turning this wasteland into a sea. Russia's Lake Karachay earned the title of Earth's most polluted place through decades of nuclear waste dumping. Standing on its shore for an hour would deliver a lethal dose of radiation. In the 1960s, a drought partially dried the lake, and radioactive dust blew across the region, contaminating 500,000 people. Now the lake is being filled with concrete, an attempt to contain its poison. Yet before its contamination, this was just another small lake in the Ural Mountains, home to fish and waterfowl. Its transformation into a nuclear grave shows how quickly humans can render a place uninhabitable for thousands of years. The radiation here won't decay to safe levels for centuries. No birds fly over it. No animals drink from it. Trees nearby grow in twisted forms. It's become a dead zone in the most literal sense, a place where the very atoms rebel against life. The concrete being poured into it is meant to create a sarcophagus, sealing away our mistakes for future generations to perhaps forget, or perhaps discover with horror. The Maldives exists in a state of geometric improbability, a nation that's more ocean than land. Its highest natural point reaches only 2.4 meters above sea level, making it Earth's flattest country. The 1,192 coral islands spread across 90,000 square kilometers of ocean, but combined, they contain less land than New York City. From above, the atolls look like necklaces of white sand dropped on blue silk, each one a perfect ring around a lagoon. The reefs that created these islands are living things, growing upward as sea levels rise, racing against time. Traditional Maldivian navigators could find their way between islands by reading the patterns of waves, feeling how swells bent around unseen atolls. Now, some islands are being artificially raised, sand pumped from the seafloor to buy time against rising oceans. The nation exists at the mercy of the sea, yet has thrived here for over 2,000 years. Every island is precious. Lose one, and you lose part of the country itself. It's a nation that could vanish not through war or economics, but through physics. Antarctica's Gamburtsev Mountains remain one of Earth's last unexplored mountain ranges, buried beneath 3 kilometers of ice. These peaks, the size of the European Alps, have been hidden for 14 million years. They were discovered only through radar that penetrates the ice, revealing a landscape frozen in time. The mountains shouldn't exist according to geological theory. They're in the middle of Antarctica, far from any tectonic plate boundary. Their presence suggests ancient geological events we don't fully understand. Rivers once flowed here, carving valleys now filled with ice. The discovery of unfrozen water beneath the ice suggests the mountains might host isolated ecosystems, life that has been evolving in darkness for millions of years. No human has ever seen these peaks or touched their rocks. They exist in a perpetual ice age, waiting. If Antarctica's ice ever melts, these mountains will emerge like a lost world, bearing witness to a time when the continent was green and warm, when dinosaurs might have walked across slopes that are now buried under miles of frozen water. The Amazon basin doesn't just experience weather, it creates it. Every day, trees in this vast rainforest release 20 billion tons of water vapor into the atmosphere, more than the Amazon River carries to the sea. This atmospheric river flows above the canopy, carrying moisture that will fall as rain in São Paulo, Buenos Aires, and even the American Midwest. Each large tree pumps out 1,000 liters of water daily, acting like a living fountain. The forest generates its own rain clouds, which drop their water and are refilled by the trees in an endless cycle. Cut down too much forest, and the rain stops coming, turning rainforest to savanna. then savanna to desert. The trees here communicate through chemical signals, warning each other of insect attacks, coordinating their fruiting, sharing nutrients through fungal networks. The forest breathes in a rhythm measured in hours, absorbing carbon dioxide by day, releasing it at night, the entire basin pulsing like a green lung. Satellites can watch this breathing from space, the forest's exhalations forming clouds that drift across continents. Kazakhstan's Aral Sea has become the Aralkum Desert, one of the newest deserts on Earth. Since 1960, what was once the world's fourth largest lake has shrunk by 90%, leaving ships stranded in what looks like a maritime graveyard in the middle of a desert. Former fishing villages now stand 100 kilometers from water. The seabed, exposed to air for the first time in thousands of years, has become a source of toxic dust storms that carry pesticide residues and salt across Central Asia. Yet, in this ecological catastrophe, something unexpected happened. The smaller northern section of the sea, now separated from the south, has been partially restored. Fish have returned. Birds migrate here again. It's a reminder that some environmental damage can be reversed, though the greater sea will never return. Where water once stretched to the horizon, camels now walk past rusted ships, and what was once lakebed is now home to Saxol trees. The transformation happened within a single human lifetime. People who swam here as children now walk across its dried floor as grandparents. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge runs like Earth's backbone for 16,000 kilometers beneath the ocean, the longest mountain range on our planet, yet mostly invisible to us. This underwater cordillera marks where new Earth is born, as magma rises from the mantle and creates fresh seafloor. Iceland sits atop the only section that breaks the surface, a rare glimpse of this hidden range. The ridge spreads at about 2.5 centimeters per year, slowly widening the Atlantic Ocean. Deep sea vents along its length support ecosystems that don't depend on sunlight, where giant tube worms feed on chemicals and blind shrimp navigate by sensing infrared radiation from the hot vents. These communities exist in total darkness, under crushing pressure, in water that can reach 400 degrees Celsius at the vents. The ridge creates its own weather system in the deep ocean, generating currents that affect climate worldwide. Earthquakes constantly ripple along its length, mostly too deep and remote for humans to feel. It's planetary construction happening in real time, hidden beneath miles of dark water, building Earth's surface in a place we rarely think to look. Mount Augustus rises from the Australian outback as the world's largest monolith, twice the size of Uluru, yet far less known. This single rock, 717 meters high and 8 kilometers long, is actually the exposed tip of an ancient sandstone formation that extends far underground. Its surface changes color through the day, gray at dawn, red at noon, purple at dusk. The rock is 1.6 billion years old, formed when Earth's atmosphere had no oxygen, when the planet was alien to what it would become. Aboriginal peoples have lived in its shadow for 30,000 years, their art still visible in caves at its base. The mountain stands alone in a flat landscape, visible from 160 kilometers away, a navigation point in a sea of spinifex grass and red earth. Unlike Uluru's smooth surface, Augustus is ridged and gullied, covered in plants that have found purchase in its ancient stone. After rare rains, waterfalls cascade down its sides for a few hours before the desert reclaims its dryness. It's a mountain that seems to have been dropped from somewhere else, a geological anomaly that makes the flat land around it seem like an ocean of red sand. Turkmenistan's Darvaza crater has burned continuously since 1971, when Soviet engineers accidentally breached a cavern filled with natural gas. To prevent the gas from poisoning nearby villages, they decided to burn it off, expecting it would extinguish in days. 5 decades later, the fire still burns in this 70-meter-wide crater, earning it the name Door to Hell. The flames never cease, fed by gas seeping from deep underground. At night, the crater glows like an eye in the desert, visible from kilometers away. Spiders are drawn to the edge, then tumble into the inferno, creating a rim of perpetual small deaths. The heat warps the air above it into a column that birds avoid. Local nomads tell their children it's where the earth bleeds fire. Scientists aren't sure how much longer it will burn. The gas could run out tomorrow or continue for centuries. The president has ordered it extinguished several times, but no one knows how to stop it without releasing more gas. It's become an accidental monument to human miscalculation, a fire we started but cannot end. Greenland presses down on Earth's crust with such weight that the bedrock beneath its center has sunk below sea level. The ice sheet, 3 kilometers thick in places, weighs so much it has created a bowl in the planet's surface. If all the ice melted, the land would slowly rise, like a mattress recovering from a sleeper's weight, a process that would take tens of thousands of years. The ice holds enough water to raise global sea levels by 7 meters. Yet this massive frozen weight is surprisingly dynamic. Rivers of meltwater flow through the ice in summer, plunging through holes called molens to the bedrock below. The water lubricates the ice sheet's base, causing glaciers to surge toward the sea. Greenland's ice is layered like tree rings, each year's snowfall compressed into ice, creating a frozen record of Earth's climate stretching back 100,000 years. Scientists drill cores from this ice, reading ancient atmospheres trapped in bubbles, learning what the world was like before humans. It's a library written in frozen water, slowly sliding into the sea. The Sahara Desert was a green savanna just 6,000 years ago, a transformation so recent that human memories of it persist in rock art. Cave paintings in the Tassili Najar Mountains show giraffes, elephants, and hippos, where now only sand exists. Rivers flowed across what is now the world's largest hot desert. Lakes dotted the landscape. Humans herded cattle where today a person would die of thirst in hours. This green Sahara wasn't unusual. The desert oscillates between wet and dry periods every 20,000 years, controlled by wobbles in Earth's orbit that shift monsoon patterns. The transformation from green to desert happened rapidly, within just a few centuries. Entire civilizations had to flee or perish as the rain stopped coming. The sand now covers ancient river channels, lake beds, and the remains of settlements. Satellite imagery reveals these ghost rivers beneath the sand, their channels still visible like veins under skin. The Sahara will turn green again, though not for another 15,000 years. It's a reminder that Earth's most permanent-seeming features are actually in constant, slow flux, that deserts are sometimes forests waiting their turn. New Zealand's Milford Sound collects 7 meters of rainfall annually, making it one of the wettest inhabited places on Earth. This fjord, carved by glaciers and drowned by rising seas, creates its own weather. Moist air from the Tasman Sea hits the surrounding mountains and has nowhere to go but up and then down as rain. It rains here 2 out of every 3 days. Waterfalls appear and disappear with each storm. After heavy rain, hundreds of temporary waterfalls cascade down the fjord's walls, vanishing within hours when the rain stops. The constant rain creates a unique phenomenon. A layer of fresh water floats on top of the salt water, stained brown by tannins from the forest, blocking light and allowing deep-sea species to live much closer to the surface than anywhere else. Black coral, normally found below 40 meters, grows here at depths accessible to divers. Captain Cook sailed right past the entrance twice without seeing it, the narrow opening hidden by mountains and constant mist. The Maori who first found it called it Piopiotahi, after the now extinct piopio bird, a thrush whose song once echoed off these vertical walls of stone and falling water. The Baltic Sea is rising from the earth like a slow-motion resurrection. Still recovering from ice sheets that melted 10,000 years ago, the seafloor rebounds about 9 millimeters each year in some places. This post-glacial rebound means that medieval harbors now sit inland, their docks dry, their purpose forgotten. New islands emerge from the waves every year, claimed quickly by nations whose territory expands without conquest. The Baltic is also the world's youngest sea and one of the least salty, almost fresh water in some northern reaches. This brackish mixture creates unique ecosystems where marine and freshwater species mingle uneasily. The sea freezes in winter, creating ice roads between islands and mainland. It's so young, geologically, that it hasn't had time to develop the biodiversity of older seas. The Baltic has lived as a lake, an ocean, and now something in between, its identity still forming. Maps of its coastline become outdated within decades as land rises and water retreats. Finland and Sweden grow larger every year without trying, gaining land from the sea through patient geological processes that operate on timescales that dwarf human history. Chile stretches like a ribbon along South America's edge, 4,270 kilometers long, but averaging only 177 kilometers wide. This improbable shape creates a country with every climate on Earth except tropical rainforest. The north holds the world's driest desert. The south has glaciers and fjords. The center enjoys Mediterranean weather. You could drive for days without leaving Chile, yet never be more than a few hours from either the Pacific Ocean or the Andes Mountains. This narrow strip contains the world's largest swimming pool, the world's highest geyser field, and valleys where NASA tests Mars rovers. The shape defies conventional nation-building logic. It would be like the entire US West Coast being one country from Mexico to Canada, but only extending inland to the first mountain range. Chileans joke that when God finished creating the world, he had leftover bits of everything: deserts, forests, glaciers, volcanoes, so he lined them up along South America's edge and called it Chile. The country is so long that sunset in the north happens almost an hour before sunset in the south, a nation that exists in multiple moments simultaneously. Lake Turkana in Kenya's Rift Valley is the world's largest permanent desert lake and the world's largest alkaline lake, a 6,405 square kilometer paradox of water in one of Earth's hottest, driest places. Its jade-green waters, colored by algae that thrive in the alkaline conditions, earned it the name Jade Sea. The lake has no outlet, losing water only through evaporation in temperatures that regularly exceed 40 degrees Celsius. This creates increasingly salty water that few fish can tolerate, yet it supports massive Nile crocodiles, some over 6 meters long. Volcanic islands dot its surface, their black rocks standing stark against green water and blue sky. The lake is shrinking, having dropped 10 meters in recent decades, revealing fossilized evidence that it has dried completely and refilled many times. 3 rivers feed it, but dams and irrigation upstream threaten its existence. The winds here are so constant and strong, they have a name: the Turkana Wind Corridor. Anthropologists call this region the cradle of mankind. More human ancestor fossils have been found here than anywhere else. It's where humanity learned to walk upright, on shores that looked much the same millions of years ago. The Tibetan Plateau spreads larger than Western Europe at an average elevation of 4,500 meters, earning its name as the roof of the world. This vast highland contains the headwaters of rivers that support nearly half of humanity. The Yangtze, Yellow, Mekong, Ganges, and Indus all begin here. The plateau is so high and massive it affects global weather patterns, influencing the Asian monsoon that billions depend upon. Its elevation means the air contains 40% less oxygen than at sea level. Tibetans have evolved unique adaptations to survive here. Their blood carries more oxygen, their arteries are wider, their breathing more efficient. The plateau continues rising about 5 millimeters per year as India pushes into Asia. In summer, the land heats up faster than the surrounding air, creating an enormous chimney effect that draws moist air from the Indian Ocean, triggering the monsoon. In winter, it becomes a frozen desert, temperatures dropping to minus 40 degrees. The permafrost here is melting, releasing carbon stored for millennia. Lakes that were frozen for thousands of years now ripple with waves. It's a landscape in transition, where ancient ice meets modern warmth. Venezuela's Catatumbo River hosts Earth's most reliable lightning storm, striking up to 280 times per hour, 260 nights per year. This celestial violence occurs where the river meets Lake Maracaibo, creating 1.2 million lightning strikes annually in the same location. The phenomenon is so regular that colonial sailors used it for navigation, calling it the Maracaibo Beacon. The lightning stops only during particularly severe droughts. It's caused by a perfect storm of geography. Warm Caribbean winds meet cold Andean air, exactly where methane rises from lake marshes, creating an atmospheric riot that plays out nightly. The storms typically begin an hour after sunset and continue until dawn. From a distance, the lightning appears to be happening in silence. The thunder taking so long to arrive, it seems disconnected from the light. Local indigenous peoples believed it was the spirits of fireflies gathering to pay tribute to the gods. Scientists have tried to harness this reliable electricity, though no practical method has succeeded. The lightning has likely been occurring for thousands of years, possibly millions, making this one spot on Earth that has been illuminated almost every night throughout human history. The Indonesian archipelago scatters 17,508 islands across 5,000 kilometers of tropical ocean, though only about 6,000 have human inhabitants. This nation of islands contains more volcanic activity than anywhere else on Earth, with 127 active volcanoes. Some islands appear and disappear with eruptions and erosion. Others are so remote, they've never been properly mapped. The archipelago sits at the intersection of 4 tectonic plates, making it one of the most geologically violent places on Earth. Yet this instability creates incredible fertility. Volcanic soil feeds rice terraces, tropical forests, and gardens that seem to grow overnight. The waters between islands host more marine biodiversity than anywhere else, the famous Coral Triangle. Each island group developed its own language, customs, even its own species. Wallace's Line runs through the archipelago, an invisible boundary where Asian animals give way to Australian ones, where tigers and orangutans exist on one side, marsupials and monotremes on the other. It's a nation that exists more in water than on land, where the sea isn't a barrier but a highway, where national identity somehow spans thousands of separate worlds. Death Valley's Badwater Basin marks North America's lowest point at 86 meters below sea level, a depression filled with salt that forms geometric patterns across its floor. The salt flat constantly changes, expanding and contracting with temperature, creating polygons that grow and merge like living things. After rare rains, the basin becomes a shallow lake for days or weeks, perfectly reflecting the surrounding mountains before evaporating back to salt. The ground here is never truly solid. Dig down a few inches, and you find mud saturated with minerals that would kill most life. Yet tiny organisms thrive in this brine, giving some pools their pink color. Temperatures here have reached 54 degrees Celsius, hot enough to cook eggs on rocks. The basin is still sinking, dropping about 2 millimeters per year. At night, the salt crystals reflect moonlight, creating a ghostly glow across the valley floor. Rocks here mysteriously move, leaving trails in the dried mud, pushed by ice sheets that form on winter nights and are blown by wind, a phenomenon that remained unexplained until recently. It's a place of extremes where Earth experiments with the limits of what a landscape can be. The Congo River generates such force that it shoots sediment 160 kilometers into the Atlantic Ocean through an underwater canyon, refusing to form a normal delta. This river, second only to the Amazon in flow, is the world's deepest, plunging to depths of 220 meters in places. The current is so strong that it has carved a canyon extending far into the ocean floor, a submarine valley that rivals the Grand Canyon in scale. This underwater canyon channels sediment far from shore, building underwater sediment fans instead of the typical delta. The river crosses the equator twice, the only major river to do so, meaning it always has tributaries in a rainy season, maintaining massive flow year-round. In the river's depths live fish that have never been cataloged, adapted to pressures and currents that would destroy most aquatic life. The river's flow is so consistent that hydrologists have proposed damming it at Inga Falls to create the world's largest hydroelectric facility, though the project's scale defies current engineering. Local fishermen speak of water spirits in the depths, and given what we don't know about what lives in the Congo's deepest channels, they might not be entirely wrong. Mount Erebus in Antarctica maintains one of only 5 persistent lava lakes on Earth, keeping molten rock liquid despite air temperatures of -20 degrees Celsius. This volcanic paradox rises from the frozen continent, steam constantly billowing from its summit into the polar air. The lava lake has been active since at least 1972, possibly much longer, bubbling and churning in its summit crater. Ice caves form around fumaroles on the mountain's flanks, creating chambers of warmth in the frozen volcano, where unique microbiomes exist. These ice caves, carved by volcanic heat, host their own ecosystems in total darkness. The volcano spews gold dust, microscopic crystals of metallic gold expelled with volcanic gases, though in quantities too small to mine. Erebus is one of the few volcanoes on Earth that's been continuously monitored by scientists who live year-round at its base, watching this collision of fire and ice. The volcano is named after the Greek god of darkness, appropriate for a mountain that spends 4 months each year in polar night. Its eruptions throw volcanic bombs of molten rock onto glaciers, where they sit steaming in ice until they cool. The Philippines' Chocolate Hills comprise 1,176 perfectly cone-shaped hills spread across 50 square kilometers of Bohol Island, their origin still debated by geologists. During dry season, the grass covering them turns brown, transforming the landscape into what looks like endless rows of chocolate drops. Each hill stands between 30 and 120 meters high, remarkably uniform in shape despite being natural formations. The leading theory suggests they're weathered limestone formations, ancient coral reefs lifted above sea level and carved by rain over millions of years. But this doesn't fully explain their regularity. Local legend says they're the dried tears of a giant, or the scattered remains of a battle between giants throwing boulders. The hills change color with the seasons, green in the wet months, golden brown in dry periods, sometimes purple when certain flowers bloom. No trees grow on them, just grass, giving them their smooth, regular appearance. Between the hills, rice paddies and forests create a patchwork landscape. The formation is so unusual that similar hills found elsewhere in the Philippines and Indonesia are also called chocolate hills, though none match Bohol's peculiar perfection. Siberia's Putarana Plateau harbors more than 25,000 lakes in a basalt landscape created by massive volcanic eruptions 250 million years ago. This plateau, larger than Great Britain, is one of Earth's last unexplored regions, so remote that parts have never been mapped from the ground. The lakes fill canyons between basalt cliffs, creating a landscape of parallel water bodies that look like blue stripes from above. Some lakes are connected by waterfalls, including Russia's highest. Others are isolated, their ecosystems evolving separately for millennia. The basalt here erupted from the Siberian Traps, the largest volcanic event in Earth's history, which may have caused the Permian extinction. Now, the volcanic rock holds water like a massive sponge, releasing it slowly through countless streams. In winter, the lakes freeze meters thick, becoming highways for the few reindeer herders who know these lands. The plateau affects weather patterns across Siberia, creating its own climate system. Snow can fall any month of the year. Temperatures range from -70 in winter to +40 Celsius in summer. It's a landscape of extremes, where water and volcanic rock have created something unique on Earth. The Great Blue Hole off Belize drops 124 meters straight down, a perfectly circular marine sinkhole 300 meters across. This underwater cave formed during ice ages when sea levels were lower and the limestone ceiling collapsed, creating a vertical shaft now filled with ocean. From above, it appears as a dark blue eye in the turquoise waters of Lighthouse Reef. Divers descending into it pass through layers of time. Stalactites hanging like chandeliers at 40 meters prove this was once a dry cave. The water becomes clearer with depth, visibility extending over 60 meters. At about 90 meters, a hydrogen sulfide layer creates a milky halocline where fresh and salt water meet but don't mix. Below this, the water lacks oxygen, preserving anything that sinks. The walls are perfectly vertical, covered in marine growth near the surface, but bare rock below where light doesn't reach. Sharks patrol the rim, using the hole's depth for cleaning stations. Jacques Cousteau made it famous, calling it one of the world's best diving sites. It's a portal between worlds, the sunlit Caribbean above and the prehistoric darkness below. Mongolia's Gobi Desert expands by 3,600 square kilometers each year, steadily consuming grasslands that have supported nomadic herders for millennia. This cold desert, where temperatures swing from -40 to +45 Celsius, challenges our conception of what deserts should be. Snow leopards hunt here. Bactrian camels, with their 2 humps, have evolved to survive both the heat and cold. The desert hides dinosaur eggs so well preserved that embryonic skin patterns are visible. Entire dinosaur skeletons lie exposed where wind has scoured away sand and rock. The expansion happens through desertification, overgrazing, climate change, and wind erosion working together. Herders who once needed days to reach the desert edge now live within it. Sand dunes sing here too, different songs than the Namib, lower tones that travel further in the thin, cold air. The Gobi is actually several deserts in one, sandy, rocky, mountainous, each with its own ecology. Oases appear like mirages but are real, fed by underground rivers from distant mountains. It's a desert that snows, a contradiction that defines this land where summer and winter, wet and dry, life and death exist in extreme proximity. The River Thames flows through 45 locks along its 346-kilometer journey from source to sea, each one a step down toward the ocean. These locks, some dating back centuries, turn the river into a liquid staircase, controlling water levels for navigation. Without them, the Thames would be a series of unnavigable rapids and shallows. Each lock is a pause in the river's flow, a moment where water must wait for permission to continue its journey. Lock keepers once lived at each one, manually operating the gates, knowing every boat and barge by name. Now most are automated, but the rhythm remains: fill, equalize, release. The locks create different rivers. Above each one, the water is calm, lake-like. Below, it remembers it's heading for the sea. Some locks drop boats just inches, others several meters. Together, they've made London a port despite being far inland, allowing seagoing vessels to penetrate deep into England's heart. At night, the locks sleep, their gates closed, holding the river in segments like a sectioned snake, each part waiting for dawn to resume its crawl toward the sea. Easter Island sits 3,512 kilometers from Chile's coast and 2,075 kilometers from the nearest inhabited island, making it one of Earth's most isolated inhabited places. This extreme isolation created a unique culture that carved the famous Moai statues, nearly 1,000 of them, some weighing 70 tons. The island is so remote that the Polynesian navigators who found it around 1200 CE might have thought they'd reached the world's edge. They called it Rapa Nui, and their descendants still do. The island's ecosystem collapsed from deforestation. Every tree was cut, leaving a grassland where forest once stood. Without wood for boats, the islanders became prisoners on their own island, unable to leave or even fish beyond the surf. The statues, Moai, were walked into place using ropes and coordinated rocking, a technique that sounds mythical but works. The island is actually the summit of a massive volcanic mountain rising from the ocean floor, most of it underwater. Its isolation has made it a natural laboratory for studying what happens when humans push an environment past its limits. Now the island depends entirely on supplies flown or shipped from thousands of kilometers away. Turkey's Pamukkale terraces cascade down a hillside like frozen waterfalls made of white stone. These natural infinity pools formed over millennia as calcium-rich thermal waters deposited minerals layer by layer, creating terraces that look designed but are entirely natural. The water emerges at 35 degrees Celsius, carrying dissolved limestone that precipitates out as it cools and releases carbon dioxide. Each terrace fills with thermal water, brilliant blue against the white travertine. The formations continue growing, about 2 millimeters per year, slowly changing shape. Ancient Romans built the city of Hierapolis here, recognizing the water's therapeutic properties. They constructed pools that still function, where visitors can swim above submerged marble columns from ancient temples. The white terraces reflect sunlight so intensely they can be seen from across the valley, earning the name Cotton Castle in Turkish. Walking on them feels like traversing another planet. The white rock underfoot, warm water flowing over feet, the valley spreading below. Hotels once diverted the thermal water for their pools, nearly destroying the formations, turning them gray. Now, water flow is carefully managed, restoring the brilliant white that had been turning dingy, proof that human damage to geological wonders can sometimes be undone. The Okavango Delta in Botswana floods backward. Its annual flood arrives during the dry season, not the wet. Water from Angola's highlands takes 4 months to travel 1,200 kilometers, arriving just when the local rains have stopped. This creates an oasis in the Kalahari Desert, a 15,000 square kilometer wetland that appears and disappears annually. The delta has no outlet to the sea. All its water evaporates or seeps into sand. This inland delta supports extraordinary wildlife concentrations. Elephants swim between islands. Hippos create channels that become highways for other animals. Lions hunt in water. Each year's flood is different, creating new islands, drowning others, constantly redrawing the map. Termites build mounds that become islands, the only dry land during maximum flood. Trees grow on these termite islands, creating perfect circles of forest and seas of grass. The water is incredibly pure, filtered through kilometers of sand and papyrus. Local peoples navigate in Mokoro, dugout canoes poled through channels that might not exist next year. It's the world's largest inland delta, a river that gives up on reaching the ocean, spending itself instead on creating temporary paradise in the desert. Japan consists of 6,152 islands stretched across 3,000 kilometers of ocean, though only 430 are inhabited. This archipelago exists because 4 tectonic plates meet here, crumpling ocean floor into mountains that break the surface. The islands are still growing. New ones appear with volcanic eruptions. Others sink or erode away. Some islands are so small they disappear at high tide. Others, like Honshu, rank among Earth's largest. The arrangement creates microclimates. Cherry blossoms bloom first in southern Okinawa in January, reaching northern Hokkaido by May, a wave of pink moving north for 4 months. The islands form a barrier between the Pacific Ocean and the Sea of Japan, affecting ocean currents and weather patterns across East Asia. Underwater, the islands continue as mountain ranges, connecting to other chains we classify separately only because water covers them. The isolation of each island has created unique subspecies. Different islands have different monkeys, different trees, even different dialects of Japanese. Some islands are forbidden to visitors, preserved as nature reserves or sacred spaces. It's a nation defined by edges, where land and sea negotiate constantly, where earthquakes and tsunamis remind residents that geography here is verb, not noun. The McMurdo dry valleys in Aicha and Antarctica haven't seen rain for nearly 2 million years, making them Earth's driest place. These valleys exist in a precipitation shadow, blocked from snow by the transantarctic mountains, while katabatic winds evaporate any ice that tries to form. The ground here is bare rock and sand, looking more like Mars than Earth. NASA tests instruments here destined for the red planet. Yet life persists in this seemingly sterile place. Bacteria live inside rocks, using the stone itself as a greenhouse. When researchers drill into the permafrost, they find microbes that have been dormant for millions of years, springing back to life when warmed. The valleys contain mummified seals, hundreds of miles from the ocean, perfectly preserved in the dry air. No one knows why the seals traveled so far inland to die. Blood falls seeps from Taylor Glacier here, red iron oxide staining the ice, fed by an ancient lake trapped beneath. The landscape is so alien that astronauts train here for moon missions. Time moves differently in the valleys. A footprint lasts decades, a moved rock centuries. It's Earth's closest approximation to an alien world, a place where the absence of water has created its own strange beauty. Brazil's Lençóis. Maranhenses National Park transforms with the seasons into something that shouldn't exist, a desert that floods. During the dry season, it's a sea of white sand dunes stretching to the horizon. But when rain comes between January and June, thousands of temporary lagoons appear between the dunes, filled with crystal-clear rainwater. These pools, some blue, some green, teem with fish that somehow survive the dry season buried in wet sand, or as eggs waiting for water's return. The dunes constantly shift, moving up to 20 meters per year, driven by coastal winds. Yet the lagoons reappear in roughly the same places, following invisible low points in the underlying geology. Local people navigate between the pools, knowing which will last longest, which have the clearest water, which hide quicksand at their edges. From above, the landscape looks like white silk shot through with turquoise thread. The sand is pure quartz, washed down from the interior over millions of years. Swimming in these temporary pools feels impossible. Warm water in a desert, surrounded by sand dunes that could be snowdrifts under tropical sun. By November, the water is gone, leaving only sand and the promise of next year's transformation. Mount Kenya rises through 8 distinct vegetation zones from base to summit, each hosting completely different ecosystems. Starting in savanna at 200 meters, you climb through forest, bamboo, moorland, and finally reach bare rock and glaciers at 5,199 meters. Each zone has its own weather, its own animals, its own evolutionary strategies. The bamboo zone grows so densely that elephants have worn tunnels through it over generations. Higher up, giant groundsels and lobelias grow like Dr. Seuss plants, adapted to nightly freezing and daily thawing. These plants close their leaves at night, hugging their stems for warmth. The moorland zone hosts plants found nowhere else, evolved in isolation on this sky island. Leopards hunt rock hyraxes near the snow line. The mountain creates its own weather, catching moisture from passing clouds, feeding streams that water the lands below. Local Kikuyu people traditionally believed God lived on the mountain's peak, and they built their homes with doors facing it. The glaciers are disappearing, having shrunk 90% in the past century. Soon, Africa's second highest mountain will lose its ice crown entirely. Each zone is migrating upward as the climate warms, the vegetation zones climbing like slow-motion bands ascending the mountain. The Faroe Islands experience 300 rainy days per year, existing in near-perpetual precipitation. These 18 volcanic islands in the North Atlantic catch every weather system passing between Iceland and Scotland. The rain here doesn't fall so much as hover, a constant mist that makes horizontal water a regular occurrence. Winds can reverse waterfalls, blowing them back up cliffs. Houses have grass roofs, not for aesthetics, but for insulation and stability in the constant wind. The grass roots hold the roofs together through storms that would tear off conventional roofing. Despite the rain, trees barely grow here. Viking sheep ate them all centuries ago, and the wind prevents new forests from establishing. The landscape is pure grass and rock, a green that seems impossible in its intensity. Rainbows appear almost daily, often double or triple, arcing between islands. The rain feeds over 1,000 waterfalls, some appearing only during storms, others flowing continuously. Villages learned centuries ago to build in shelter, but the wind finds everyone eventually. The local saying goes, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes. But waiting usually just brings different rain. Vertical becoming horizontal, mist becoming downpour, drizzle becoming storm. California's Mono Lake is 3 times saltier than the ocean, supporting an ecosystem that seems borrowed from another planet. The lake has no outlet, accumulating salts and minerals for at least 760,000 years. Tufa towers rise from the water like limestone castles, formed when underground springs rich in calcium met the lake's carbonate-heavy water. These towers were underwater sculptures, until Los Angeles diverted the tributary streams, dropping the lake level and exposing these alien formations. Trillions of brine shrimp thrive in the alkaline water, food for millions of migrating birds. Alkali flies carpet the shoreline, walking underwater in bubbles of air. Mark Twain wrote about them with amazement. The lake is so alkaline that it feels slippery, like soapy water. No fish live here. The water would pickle them. Yet the lake produces more biomass per square meter than almost any ecosystem. In certain light, the water turns red from bacteria, pink from brine, shrimp, or green from algae. Islands in the lake host California gull colonies, protected from predators by the caustic moat. The lake is slowly rising again after legal battles secured water rights, submerging tufa towers that had been exposed for decades, returning them to their underwater sculpture garden. The skeleton coast of Namibia is littered with over 1,000 shipwrecks, earning its name from the whale bones and human remains that once lined its shores. Dense fog, created when the cold Benguela Current meets hot desert air, blinds sailors. Hidden rocks, violent surf, and treacherous currents complete the trap. Ships that wreck here face a terrible irony. Surviving the wreck means dying in the desert. The coast is backed by the Namib Desert, no water for hundreds of kilometers. Portuguese sailors called it the gates of hell. Even modern ships with GPS struggle here. The wrecks span centuries, from Portuguese galleons to modern fishing vessels, slowly being buried by sand or broken by waves. Some sit kilometers inland, the coast having shifted over time. Desert-adapted elephants walk among rusted hulls. Lions patrol beaches, hunting seals where ocean meets desert. The fog that causes wrecks also sustains life. Plants and animals here survive on moisture harvested from mist. Beetles stand on their heads, letting fog condense and run down to their mouths. The same fog that blinds sailors keeps the desert alive, a paradox written in rust and bone along this apocalyptic shore. Bhutan's constitution mandates that 60% of the country remain forested forever, the only nation with such a requirement. Currently at 71% forest coverage, Bhutan absorbs more carbon dioxide than it produces, making it carbon negative. This commitment to preservation shapes everything. New roads curve around trees rather than cutting through them. Development projects are rejected if they threaten forest coverage. The forests range from tropical jungle in the south to alpine conifers in the north, hosting tigers, elephants, and snow leopards in one small country. Trees here are considered sacred, some wrapped in prayer flags, others left standing in the middle of towns. The Constitution reflects Buddhist beliefs about the interconnection of all life. Gross national happiness, not gross domestic product, guides policy decisions. The forests create their own economy through sustainable harvesting, ecotourism, and payment for ecosystem services. Bhutan proves a nation can develop without destroying nature. Rivers run clean from forest to valley. Air quality ranks among the world's best. The forest mandate isn't seen as limiting development, but ensuring it continues forever. It's a country that chose trees over GDP, understanding that the former ensures the latter's longevity. The Siberian traps cover 2 million square kilometers, with ancient lava flows up to 3.5 kilometers thick in places, remnants of the largest volcanic event in Earth's known history. These eruptions, 250 million years ago, possibly caused the Permian extinction, killing 90% of all species. The lava flooded out not from a single volcano, but from massive cracks in the earth, covering an area larger than Europe. The name traps comes from the Swedish word for stairs, describing how the basalt eroded into step-like hills. These eruptions released enough sulfur dioxide to cause acid rain globally, enough carbon dioxide to trigger extreme warming. The lava flows created the Putarana Plateau, now one of Earth's last unexplored regions. Rivers cutting through the basalt have exposed the layers, each one a separate eruption, together telling the story of an apocalypse in stone. The scale defies comprehension. Imagine the entire eastern United States covered in lava kilometers deep. Life took millions of years to recover. The Siberian traps remind us that Earth has reset itself before, that continents can bleed lava, that our planet is capable of violence we can barely imagine. Yet life returned, different but persistent, growing on the cooled lava that ended an earlier world. Mauritius emerged from the Indian Ocean through underwater volcanic eruptions 8 million years ago, the youngest of the Mascarene Islands. This volcanic birth created an island of extraordinary fertility, where 700 species of plants evolved, found nowhere else. The dodo lived here, evolving flightlessness in the absence of predators until humans arrived. The island is surrounded by coral reefs except at one point where an underwater waterfall illusion occurs. Sand and silt pouring off the submarine shelf into the abyss, looking exactly like a waterfall when viewed from above. The volcanic soil is so rich that sugarcane has grown here for centuries without depleting it. Mark Twain wrote that God created Mauritius first, then used it as a model for paradise. The island's isolation created unique ecosystems: the ebony forests, the endemic flying foxes, the pink pigeons saved from extinction. Beneath the island, scientists have found evidence of a lost continent, Mauritius, mostly submerged when India separated from Madagascar. Mauritius is just the tiny portion that stayed above water, a fragment of something much larger. Cyclones regularly batter the island, but the reefs absorb most of the ocean's fury, protecting the volcanic paradise they encircle. The Colorado River carved the Grand Canyon over 6 million years, exposing rock layers that read like Earth's autobiography, stretching back 2 billion years. Each layer tells a different story: ancient seas, deserts, swamps, each preserved in stone. The river cut down as the land rose up, maintaining its gradient while exposing ever-older rock. At the canyon's bottom runs the Great Unconformity, where 250-million-year-old rock sits directly on 1.7-billion-year-old rock, a gap representing a quarter of Earth's history simply missing, eroded away. The canyon is 446 kilometers long, up to 29 kilometers wide, and over 1.8 kilometers deep. Standing on the rim, you look across distances that defeat depth perception. The other side seems touchable, but is a day's hike down, across, and up. Weather at the rim and river can differ by 30 degrees. Life zones stack vertically: desert at the bottom, forest at the top. The canyon creates its own weather, with updrafts so strong that birds ride them without flapping. Sunset here doesn't just happen, it performs, painting each rock layer in sequence. The Colorado River now barely reaches the sea, dammed and diverted, but the canyon it carved continues to grow deeper by the width of a human hair each year. Somalia claims Africa's longest coastline at 3,133 kilometers, more than any other African nation. This enormous coast ranges from coral reefs to cliff tops, from white sand beaches to rocky promontories. Yet this geographical blessing has become complicated. The coast is largely uncontrolled, ungoverned spaces where legality blurs. Ancient ports that once traded with Rome and China now host different commerce. The monsoon winds that brought traders for millennia still determine the fishing seasons. These waters, where the Gulf of Aden meets the Indian Ocean, host some of the world's richest fishing grounds. Yet foreign vessels often fish illegally, taking catches that local fishermen in small boats cannot compete with. The Somali Current runs northward along this coast, one of the western boundary currents that shape global climate. During summer monsoons, it reverses, flowing southward. This current reversal brings different fish, different weather, different possibilities. Traditional navigators read these currents like roads. The coastline includes Africa's easternmost point, Cape Guardafui, where the continent reaches toward Arabia. Here, two seas meet in perpetual conflict, creating some of the roughest waters in the world. It's a coast of contradictions, blessed with resources but cursed by circumstance. Iran's Zagros Mountains contain salt glaciers that flow like ice, some extending 5 kilometers down valleys. These aren't frozen water, but pure salt, ancient deposits from when this region was seafloor, now squeezed up through the mountains and flowing under their own weight. The salt moves about 1 centimeter per day, faster than regular glaciers. Some are white, others pink from minerals, others black from oil seepage. The salt is so pure it looks like ice, forming crevasses and seracs just like mountain glaciers. Rain dissolves their surfaces, creating sharp formations called cairn. In summer, the salt cracks in the heat. In winter, it flows faster. Some salt glaciers are 90% pure halite, table salt. Others contain potash, gypsum, and other evaporites. They've been flowing for millions of years, salt from the Precambrian Ocean still moving through modern mountains. Local people have harvested this salt for millennia, simply breaking off pieces from these geological conveyor belts. The glaciers create their own valleys, dissolving the rock they flow over, leaving behind salt caves and sinkholes. It's geology in motion, solid behaving as liquid, mountains made of seasoning flowing like frozen rivers through an arid landscape. Alaska contains 3 million lakes larger than 5 acres, more than any other state despite much of it being frozen half the year. These lakes formed when glaciers retreated, leaving depressions called kettles, or when permafrost melted, creating thermokarst lakes. Some lakes appear and disappear seasonally. Others drain catastrophically when permafrost dams fail. From above, the landscape looks diseased with lakes, more water than land in some regions. Each lake hosts its own ecosystem. Arctic char live in some, found nowhere else in that particular genetic variation. Millions of birds migrate here to breed, using the lakes as stepping stones across the Arctic. In winter, the lakes become highways for dog sleds and snow machines. The ice grows so thick that trucks can drive across. Some lakes have been frozen to the bottom for thousands of years. Climate change is creating new lakes as permafrost melts, while draining others as frozen barriers fail. Methane bubbles up from lake bottoms, released from thawing permafrost, frozen in winter ice like prehistoric breath. Native peoples have names for different types of lake ice, each with its own sound when it cracks, its own danger when crossed. The lakes are archives, their sediments recording volcanic eruptions, climate changes, even atomic bomb tests. The Nile River flows north, one of the few major rivers on Earth to flow away from the equator. This northward journey spans 6,650 kilometers from its source to the Mediterranean Sea. The river's direction puzzled ancient geographers who assumed all rivers flowed south. The Nile flows north simply because its source sits at higher elevation than its mouth, gravity caring nothing for cardinal directions. Two major tributaries create the Nile, the White Nile providing steady flow, the Blue Nile bringing seasonal floods. They meet at Khartoum in a confluence where brown and blue waters flow side by side for kilometers before mixing. The river crosses the Sahara, creating a ribbon of green through the world's largest hot desert. Without the Nile, Egypt would be uninhabitable desert. Herodotus called Egypt the gift of the Nile. The river's floods were so regular that ancient Egyptians based their calendar on them. Now dammed at Aswan, the floods no longer come, changing an ecosystem that had functioned the same way for millennia. Crocodiles that once reached the Mediterranean are confined to Lake Nasser. The delta, no longer replenished with silt, is eroding. Yet the river continues north, indifferent to the civilizations it created and sustains. New Guinea harbors 5% of Earth's biodiversity on just 1% of its land, making it one of the most biologically intense places on the planet. The island hosts 800 languages, some spoken by fewer than 100 people, each representing a unique culture evolved in isolation. Birds of paradise display here in forests where tree kangaroos hop through canopies. The island was never connected to Asia or Australia during ice ages, allowing unique evolution. Scientists discover new species monthly: frogs that hatch as fully formed froglets, moths larger than birds, carnivorous plants that trap rats. The mountains create thousands of isolated valleys, each a laboratory for evolution. Some tribes had no contact with the outside world until the 1960s. The island's interior remains largely unexplored, satellite images showing unclimbed mountains and undocumented valleys. Glaciers cap the highest peaks despite sitting just degrees from the equator. The biodiversity extends offshore. Raja Ampat's reefs contain 75% of all known coral species. It's a biological treasure house, more diverse than the Amazon despite being far smaller. Every expedition finds species unknown to science. The island proves that isolation and terrain complexity create diversity, that Earth still hides millions of undiscovered species in places too difficult for humans to easily reach. The Black Sea preserves ancient history in its depths, where no oxygen exists below 200 meters. This anoxic layer, caused by limited water exchange with the Mediterranean, creates perfect preservation conditions. Wooden ships from Byzantine times rest intact on the bottom, their sails still attached, ropes still tied. The lack of oxygen prevents decay. Nothing rots here. It simply waits in the darkness. The sea was once a freshwater lake until the Mediterranean broke through the Bosphorus 7,500 years ago in a catastrophic flood that might have inspired flood myths. The inflowing salt water, being denser, sank to the bottom, trapping fresh water above and creating the permanent stratification. Fish live only in the top layer. Below is a dead zone larger than the living zone. Hydrogen sulfide gives the deep water a rotten egg smell. If the layers ever mixed, it would be catastrophic, releasing toxic gas. The Romans called it the inhospitable sea, later changed to the hospitable sea in hope of better fortune. Rivers flowing into it carry less salt than flows out through the Bosphorus, maintaining the delicate layering that makes it Earth's largest meromictic basin, a sea with layers that never mix. Afghanistan's Band-e-Amir lakes glow brilliant blue year-round, their color coming from high mineral content in the surrounding cliffs. These 6 lakes, Afghanistan's only national park, sit at 3,000 meters elevation in the Hindu Kush Mountains. Natural dams of travertine, built by mineral deposits over millennia, hold the lakes in place like a series of infinity pools in the desert mountains. The water is so clear you can see bottom at 10 meters depth. The mineral content makes the water slightly alkaline, giving it a slippery feel. Local people believe the lakes were created by Ali, son-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad, explaining their sacred status. The lakes maintain their brilliant color even in winter when they partially freeze. Each lake has different minerals, creating slightly different shades of blue. No roads reached here until 2008. The isolation preserved them, but also prevented study. The travertine dams continue growing, fed by dissolved limestone in the spring water. Fish introduced decades ago have adapted to the mineral-rich water. The surrounding landscape is desert, making the blue lakes seem like geological mistakes, impossible water in an impossible place. They're called Afghanistan's Grand Canyon, though they're nothing like it except in their capacity to inspire awe. The Netherlands exists in defiance of the sea, with 26% of the country below sea level and 451 distinct areas that would flood without human intervention. The lowest point, in Zuidplaspolder, sits 6.7 meters below sea level. Amsterdam Airport is 4 meters below sea level. Passengers land below the waves. The Dutch have been creating land from water for 1,000 years, building polders protected by dikes, drained by windmills, now by electric pumps that never stop. Without pumping, much of the country would flood within weeks. The saying, "God created the world, but the Dutch created the Netherlands," reflects this engineered geography. Rivers here flow above the surrounding land, contained by embankments. During storms, water must be pumped up into these elevated rivers. The country is slowly sinking while sea levels rise, requiring constant adaptation. Floating houses rise and fall with floodwaters. Roads are built to flood deliberately, protecting cities. The Dutch word droogmakerij, dry making, has no equivalent in other languages because no other nation has made so much dry land from seafloor. It's a country in permanent negotiation with water, where geography is maintained rather than simply existing, where land itself is technology. Cameroon's Lake Nyos killed 1,746 people in 1986 when it suddenly released 1.6 million tons of CO2 in a limnic eruption, one of nature's rarest and deadliest phenomena. The lake sits in a volcanic crater, and CO2 seeps from magma below, dissolving in the water under pressure. On that August night, something triggered the lake to overturn. The CO2 erupted like a champagne bottle opening, creating a gas cloud that rolled down valleys at 50 kilometers per hour. The gas, heavier than air, suffocated everything in its path: people, cattle, birds, even insects. Survivors described dead silence, no birds singing, no insects buzzing. The lake turned from blue to red as iron-rich deep water reached the surface. Scientists now maintain degassing pipes in the lake, fountains that continuously release CO2 safely. Similar pipes were installed at nearby Lake Manoon, which killed 37 people in 1984. Only 3 such exploding lakes are known worldwide, all in Africa. The CO2 continues seeping in, requiring constant degassing. Without intervention, the lake would eventually erupt again. It's a beautiful lake that hides deadly physics, where carbon dioxide becomes a liquid time bomb, where geography includes chemistry that can kill everyone in surrounding valleys in minutes. The Appalachian Mountains are older than bones, formed 480 million years ago before animals evolved skeletons, before fish, before life conquered land. These mountains have been worn down from Himalayan heights to gentle ridges. They predate the Atlantic Ocean, formed when all continents were joined as Pangaea. The mountains are so old that they've been recycled, eroded down, buried, uplifted, and eroded again in cycles lasting hundreds of millions of years. They contain no fossils from their formation because complex life hadn't evolved yet. The rocks tell stories from when Earth's atmosphere had different chemistry, when the planet spun faster, when days were shorter. These mountains have watched continents collide and separate, oceans appear and disappear. They're made partly from compressed seafloor, pushed up when Proto-North America collided with Proto-Africa. The mountains continue eroding, washing grain by grain into the Atlantic, which didn't exist when they formed. Some of the world's oldest exposed rocks are here, dating back over 1 billion years. Trees now growing on them are descendants of forests that appeared 300 million years after the mountains formed. It's a landscape where time becomes visible, where you can touch rocks that formed before eyes evolved to see them. Russia's Kola super deep borehole reached 12,262 meters into Earth's crust, deeper than the deepest point in the ocean, yet only penetrating 0.2% of the way to Earth's center. Soviet scientists drilled for 24 years, expecting to find basalt at 4 kilometers, but finding metamorphic rock instead. At 180 degrees Celsius, far hotter than the predicted 100 degrees, the rock behaved more like plastic than solid stone. They discovered microscopic fossils at 6 kilometers depth, plankton that somehow left traces in rock formed under extreme pressure. Water existed where it shouldn't, formed from hydrogen and oxygen squeezed out of rock crystals. The drill site sounds like a portal to hell when opened. Air rushing in creates moaning that echoes from the depths. Local legends say they broke through into a cavity where they recorded the sounds of the damned, though scientists explain it as simply differential pressure and moving gases. The project ended when the drill became stuck, the heat making the rock flow back around the drill bit like thick honey. The borehole revealed that we know less about what's beneath our feet than we do about the surfaces of other planets. It remains sealed now, a concrete cap over humanity's deepest puncture wound, slowly healing as the Earth squeezes it closed. The Pacific Ocean is shrinking by 2 to 3 centimeters annually, while the Atlantic Ocean expands at the same rate, a planetary reshaping happening too slowly for human perception, but inexorably changing Earth's face. The Pacific Plate subducts under surrounding plates, disappearing into the mantle in a ring of fire marked by volcanoes and earthquakes. In 200 million years, the Pacific will close entirely, pushing Asia and the Americas together into a new supercontinent. The Atlantic, meanwhile, spreads from the mid-Atlantic ridge, creating new seafloor constantly. This means that Pacific islands are slowly moving toward their destruction, carried on their plates toward subduction zones where they'll be recycled into magma. Hawaii inches toward Japan at fingernail growth speed. The Marianas Trench deepens gradually. California creeps toward Alaska. The shrinking happens through destruction, oceanic crust melting back into the mantle, while the Atlantic's growth comes through creation of new seafloor. This planetary respiration, inhaling Pacific and exhaling Atlantic, has happened before. Oceans have opened and closed throughout Earth's history like slow-motion breathing. The Pacific is Earth's oldest ocean, but won't be its last, destined to become a geological memory while new oceans form elsewhere, perhaps splitting Africa or drowning the Mediterranean. Yemen's dragon's blood trees on Socotra Island have remained unchanged for 20 million years, their crimson resin once more valuable than gold. These trees look like giant umbrellas turned inside out, their dense crowns catching moisture from passing clouds in an almost rainless landscape. The blood-red resin, called dragon's blood, seeps from wounds in the bark, used since ancient times for medicine, magic, and violin varnish. Roman gladiators painted their bodies with it. Medieval alchemists believed it was actual dragon blood. The trees grow only on Socotra and in a small area of Yemen's mainland, remnants from when Arabia was green. Each tree takes decades to produce its first flowers, centuries to reach full size. They're succulent trees, storing water in their thick trunks and waxy leaves, adapted to drought that can last years. The resin production increases when the tree is stressed, bleeding more in dry years, as if the tree's suffering produces its treasure. Young trees rarely grow now. Goats eat the seedlings. Climate change reduces the mist they depend on. These prehistoric survivors, having outlasted the dinosaurs and ice ages, might not survive the next century. They stand on Socotra's Diksam Plateau like ancient sentinels, their red tears marking the end of an evolutionary line stretching back to when flowering plants were new. The Sundarban's mangrove forest spreads across India and Bangladesh as the world's largest tidal forest, 10,000 square kilometers of trees standing in salt water. This amphibious forest exists in the merger zone where the Ganges, Brahmaputra, and Meghna rivers meet the Bay of Bengal. Twice daily, tides transform the landscape. At high tide, only tree crowns emerge from water. At low tide, mud flats stretch between exposed roots. Tigers here have learned to swim between islands, the only tigers that hunt in water, taking fishermen from boats. The trees themselves have evolved remarkable adaptations. Some breathe through snorkel roots, others excrete salt through specialized leaves. Some give birth to live young, their seeds germinating while still attached to the parent tree. The forest creates land, trapping sediment in its root maze, building new islands grain by grain. Honey collectors risk their lives here, climbing trees while tigers patrol below, singing ancient songs believed to calm the forest spirits. Crocodiles lurk in channels that change with every tide. The forest protects millions from cyclones, absorbing storm surges that would otherwise devastate the coast. It's a forest that belongs neither to land nor sea, but to the tide, existing in the space between worlds. Antarctica's blood falls pours from Taylor Glacier like an open wound in the ice, red water staining the white glacier face. This crimson flow comes from an ancient lake trapped beneath the glacier 2 million years ago, when the climate cooled. The lake, supersaturated with iron, turns red when exposed to oxygen, the same reaction that creates rust. But the lake's real mystery is that it's liquid despite being at -10 degrees Celsius, kept from freezing by extreme salinity, 3 times saltier than seawater. Life thrives in this ancient water. Bacteria have survived without sunlight or oxygen for millions of years, using sulfate and iron to generate energy, a process that might resemble early life on Earth or potential life on Mars. The lake is so isolated that these bacteria have evolved independently from all other life for 2 million years. The blood-red water flows only occasionally, when pressure builds enough to force it through the glacier. Scientists studying it must ensure no contamination. Introducing modern microbes could destroy an ecosystem older than humanity. It's a window into deep time, preserved in liquid form, bleeding ancient history onto Antarctic ice. Croatia's Plitvice lakes cascade through 16 terraced lakes that change color hourly from azure to green to gray, depending on sunlight, minerals, and microscopic life. The lakes formed when travertine barriers built up over millennia, creating natural dams. These barriers continue growing about 1 centimeter annually, constantly reshaping the waterfalls. The water is so pure, you can see bottom at 20 meters depth. Yet swimming is forbidden, not just for preservation, but because people have drowned, the clarity making them misjudge depth. Each lake has its own character. Kozjak, the largest, takes 30 minutes to cross by electric boat. Galavachki Buck Waterfall drops 25 meters in a curtain of white foam. The lakes freeze in winter, waterfalls becoming ice sculptures. Brown bears, wolves, and lynx live in surrounding forests. The lake's colors come from limestone dissolved in the water, algae, and the angle of sunlight. After rain, the water turns gray with minerals. In drought, algae bloom green. The system is so delicate that the oils from human skin can disrupt the chemical balance that creates the travertine. Wooden walkways wind above the water, letting visitors float through this water garden without touching it. Observers in a chemistry experiment millions of years in progress. The Afar Triangle in East Africa is tearing the continent apart at 2 centimeters per year, birth pangs of Earth's next ocean. 3 tectonic plates meet here, the African, Arabian, and Somali plates, pulling away from each other in what geologists call a triple junction. In 2005, a 60-kilometer crack opened in just days, widening by 8 meters. Eventually, the Red Sea will flood in, splitting Africa. The Horn of Africa will become an island. This is how the Atlantic began 200 million years ago. The process is visible here like nowhere else on land. Volcanoes mark the spreading zone. Lakes appear and disappear. Hot springs bubble with minerals from the mantle. The Danakil Depression, part of this rift, sits below sea level, a preview of the future ocean floor. Local Afar people have adapted to this geological violence, knowing which Earth movements signal danger, which are just the planet stretching. They harvest salt from lakes that won't exist in geological time, temporary features in a landscape being born. Scientists flock here to watch continental breakup in real time, though real time means millions of years. It's Earth's slowest catastrophe, inevitable but imperceptible, measured in human fingernails' worth of movement yearly. Canada's magnetic hill creates an optical illusion where cars appear to roll uphill when actually going downhill. The surrounding landscape tilts in such a way that the horizon line is obscured, making the brain misinterpret the slope. Water seems to flow upward. Balls roll the wrong direction. It's a gravity hill, one of hundreds worldwide, where perception defeats reality. The illusion is so convincing that even knowing the truth doesn't break it. Your eyes insist on their version. Before modern understanding, people attributed it to magnetic forces, hence the name, though magnetism plays no role. The local Mi'kmaq people had legends about the area long before European settlement. Now it's a tourist attraction where people pay to experience their senses lying to them. The illusion works best on overcast days when shadows don't give away the true slope. Birds flying through seem to struggle against invisible forces. It's a place where the earth plays tricks, where landscape becomes a natural funhouse, where seeing stops being believing. The hill reminds us that our perception of the world is interpretation, not truth. The gravity always wins, even when our eyes insist otherwise. The Mediterranean Sea completely evaporated 5.96 million years ago in what scientists call the Messinian salinity crisis. The Strait of Gibraltar closed, cutting the sea off from the Atlantic. With evaporation exceeding river input, the sea dried into a salt desert 3 kilometers below current sea level. The salt layer left behind is up to 3 kilometers thick in places. Then, catastrophically, the Atlantic broke through again in the Zanclean flood. Water cascaded down at 100 million cubic meters per second, 1,000 times the flow of the Amazon. The entire Mediterranean refilled in perhaps just months to 2 years. The waterfall at Gibraltar would have been 1,500 meters high, carving a channel we can still detect. This wasn't the first time. The Mediterranean has dried and refilled multiple times, each cycle leaving salt deposits. If Gibraltar closed today, the sea would dry again in about 1,000 years. The salt deposits now lie buried under the seafloor, occasionally breaking through as salt domes. Some Mediterranean islands are actually salt mountains from ancient evaporations, pushed up through overlying rock. It's a sea that exists at geological sufferance, dependent on a narrow connection to survive, carrying the memory of its deaths in layers of salt beneath its waves. Pakistan's Hingol mud volcanoes bubble and occasionally erupt in the Makran Desert, building cones up to 100 meters high. These aren't true volcanoes, but pressurized mud and gas forcing through Earth's crust. The mud, from depths of several kilometers, carries ancient marine fossils to the surface. Some volcanoes constantly seep, others explode violently, throwing mud hundreds of meters. The largest, Chandragupta, is considered sacred, a pilgrimage site where Hindu devotees climb the muddy slopes. The mud is cold, not hot like lava, though methane gas sometimes ignites, creating flaming mud volcanoes that burn for years. After major earthquakes, new mud volcanoes appear overnight. Islands of mud emerge offshore, only to be eroded by waves within months. The mud has medicinal properties, rich in minerals from deep underground. Local people use it for skin conditions, building materials, even pottery. Some volcanoes produce nearly pure methane, potential energy sources if they could be harnessed. The landscape around them is otherworldly. Gray mud flows frozen like glaciers, miniature badlands of dried mud, pools of liquid mud that bubble like witches' cauldrons, their Earth's pimples squeezing out underground pressure, creating temporary mountains that rain dissolves, only to rebuild again. The Mekong River flows through 6 countries, supporting 60 million people along its 4,350-kilometer journey from the Tibetan Plateau to the South China Sea. This river changes personality with each nation, wild in China, sacred in Laos, mighty in Cambodia, branched in Vietnam. The annual flood pulse drives everything, reversing the flow of Cambodia's Tonle Sap Lake, creating the world's most productive freshwater fishery. Giant catfish weighing 300 kilograms once swam here, now nearly extinct. The river's sediment built the Mekong Delta, feeding half of Vietnam's rice. But dams upstream trap sediment now, starving the delta, which is sinking and shrinking. During monsoon, the river carries so much silt, it turns chocolate brown. In dry season, rocks emerge like sleeping dragons. Rapids that rage in summer become gentle streams in winter. The river supports more giant fish species than any other, evolutionary relics from when it flowed differently. Rivers have memories in their channels, and the Mekong remembers flowing to different seas as continents shifted. Each country sees a different river: China's Lancang, Thailand's Mekong, Vietnam's 9 Dragons. It's one river with many identities, binding nations that share little else except dependence on its waters. Norway's Svalbard archipelago experiences 4 months of total darkness, followed by 4 months of continuous daylight, the most extreme seasonal light variation of any inhabited place. During polar night, only the aurora and stars provide natural light. The sun disappears in October, not returning until February. Then comes the opposite. From April to August, the sun circles the horizon, never setting. This constant light disrupts human circadian rhythms, requiring blackout curtains to sleep. Plants compress their entire life cycle into the brief summer. Svalbard poppies track the circling sun, rotating through the endless day. In the dark months, reindeer eyes change color from gold to blue, increasing sensitivity to scarce light. Polar bears hunt by starlight and smell. The archipelago hosts the global seed vault, humanity's backup preserved in permafrost. No one can be born or buried here. Pregnant women and the terminally ill are flown to mainland Norway. Bodies don't decompose in the permafrost. Influenza victims from 1918 remain preserved, their virus still viable. It's a place where normal rules don't apply, where days last months, where death doesn't bring decay, where the future's seeds wait in ice while the present struggles with darkness half the year. Ethiopia's Erta Ele volcano has maintained a permanent lava lake for over a century, one of only 6 persistent lava lakes on Earth. The name means smoking mountain in the Afar language, though smoke is the least of its emissions. The lava lake churns continuously at 200 degrees Celsius, a window into Earth's mantle. The volcano sits in the Danakil Depression, already one of Earth's hottest places, making the lava lake seem almost redundant. Reaching it requires crossing salt flats where temperatures exceed 50 degrees, then climbing an active volcano at night when the heat is merely unbearable rather than lethal. The lava lake's level rises and falls like breathing, sometimes overflowing, sometimes dropping to reveal deeper magma chambers. At night, it illuminates clouds from below, creating an orange glow visible for kilometers. The constant activity means the volcano is relatively safe. Pressure never builds to dangerous levels. Local Afar people consider it sacred, the home of evil spirits that must be appeased. Scientists study it to understand how Earth's interior works, watching processes normally hidden kilometers underground. The lava lake is hypnotic, constantly changing yet always the same, destruction and creation happening simultaneously in molten stone. The Pantanal floods annually to become the world's largest tropical wetland, 10 times the size of the Everglades. This vast plain in Brazil, Bolivia, and Paraguay transforms with the seasons. In the dry season, it's grassland with isolated pools. When rain comes, 80% floods, becoming a freshwater sea dotted with islands. The flood pulse drives everything. Fish spawn in flooded forests. Caimans concentrate in shrinking pools. Birds time nesting to fish abundance. Jaguars here have the highest density on Earth, swimming between islands to hunt capybaras and caimans. The wetland acts like a giant sponge, absorbing floodwaters that would otherwise devastate downstream cities, releasing it slowly through the dry season. Cowboys work cattle here as their ancestors did, moving herds to higher ground when floods come. The Pantanal has more species of birds than all of Europe, visible in concentrations that seem impossible. Hyacinth macaws, the world's largest parrots, nest in only 2 trees species here. Giant otters, extinct elsewhere, thrive in the rivers. It's a landscape that can't decide what it wants to be, land or water, forest or grassland, so it becomes everything seasonally, a shapeshifter that supports life by constantly changing. South Korea's Jeju Island erupted from the ocean floor 2 million years ago, creating a volcanic island with 360 secondary cones. The main volcano, Halasan, is South Korea's highest peak, its summit crater lake frozen half the year. The island's volcanic soil is so porous that rain disappears immediately underground, flowing through lava tubes to emerge as springs at the coast. These lava tubes, some 13 kilometers long, are perfectly preserved, their walls showing flow patterns frozen in stone. The largest, Manjangul, contains a lava column 7.6 meters high, the world's tallest. Grandfather stones, carved from volcanic basalt, guard the island symbolically. The volcanic activity created hexagonal basalt columns along the coast, looking like giants' stepping stones. Black sand beaches formed from pulverized lava contrast with white coral beaches on the same island. Women divers, Henyo, have harvested seafood here for centuries, holding their breath to dive 20 meters without equipment. Halasan slopes host plants from 3 climate zones: subtropical at the base, temperate midway, alpine at the summit. The volcano is dormant, not extinct, last erupting 1,000 years ago. Koreans say Jeju has 3 abundances: rocks, wind, and women, all shaped by its volcanic birth from the sea. The Ural Mountains mark the traditional boundary between Europe and Asia, a 2,500-kilometer line dividing one continent into two. This ancient range, worn down to gentle hills, is older than the Atlantic Ocean. Cities like Yekaterinburg straddle the boundary, European on one side of town, Asian on the other. The division is arbitrary. Geologically, Europe and Asia are one plate. Yet the Urals became the accepted boundary, a mountain range modest enough to cross easily, but significant enough to notice. They're among Earth's oldest mountains, formed 300 million years ago when ancient continents collided. Now they're so eroded that many passes are barely noticeable. The mountains are incredibly rich in minerals, malachite, platinum, gold, the wealth that built Russian Empire. Some valleys here remained unmapped until the 20th century. The Dyatlov Pass incident, where 9 hikers died mysteriously in 1959, remains unexplained. Rivers flowing west from the Urals reach the Arctic via Europe. Those flowing east cross Asia. It's a boundary that exists more in human consciousness than geographical reality, yet shapes how we think about the world, dividing Earth's largest landmass into 2 continents based on hills that barely interrupt the landscape. Mexico's Cueva de los Cristales maintains 99% humidity and 58 degrees Celsius, conditions so extreme that unprotected humans can only survive 10 minutes before their lungs fill with fluid. The cave's selenite crystals grew in these conditions for 500,000 years, suspended in mineral-rich water heated by magma below. When miners pumped out the water in 2000, they revealed crystals up to 12 meters long, weighing 55 tons, the largest crystals ever found. Scientists wear ice-filled suits to study them, racing against time as exposure degrades the crystals. The cave is being allowed to refill with water to preserve the crystals for future study. Some crystals contain fluid inclusions with ancient bacteria, possibly alive after 500,000 years. The crystals are so pure they're transparent, like giant pieces of ice that are actually gypsum. Light passes through them, creating an otherworldly glow. Walking among them feels like being shrunk to microscopic size inside a geode. The conditions that created them, perfect temperature, mineral saturation, and time, are almost impossible to replicate. It's a place where Earth becomes artist, creating sculptures no human could imagine, in conditions no human can endure. The Ross Ice Shelf in Antarctica floats while attached to the continent's edge, a frozen platform the size of France. This massive ice shelf, 800 meters thick in places, rises and falls with tides despite its enormity. It's the world's largest floating object, connected to land but riding on water. The shelf edge, a cliff 50 meters high and 600 kilometers long, is constantly calving icebergs, some larger than cities. Beneath it, in permanent darkness, a unique ecosystem thrives. Fish with antifreeze in their blood swim upside down, using the ice ceiling as seafloor. The shelf moves seaward at 1.5 meters daily, fed by glaciers flowing from Antarctica's interior. Cracks develop, propagate, and eventually release icebergs in a process that can take decades. The shelf has broken and reformed throughout Earth's history, advancing during ice ages, retreating during warm periods. It's Earth's frozen frontier, the boundary between solid continent and liquid ocean, stable for centuries then changing catastrophically. Scientists camp on it, drilling through to study the ocean below, living on ice that's moving, working above water they'll never see. Singapore has grown its land area by 25% since independence through reclamation, adding 140 square kilometers by moving Earth on an unprecedented scale. The country imports sand from throughout Southeast Asia, though many nations now ban sand exports to Singapore. Entire hills in nearby countries have disappeared, transformed into Singaporean land. The reclamation happens gradually. Seawalls built, water pumped out, sand pumped in, land created. Marina Bay, now the city's iconic center, was ocean 50 years ago. The airport sits on reclaimed land. Future plans could add another 100 square kilometers. This growth has ecological costs: mangroves destroyed, coral reefs buried, fishing grounds lost. Yet Singapore has also created new habitats, engineering wetlands, and allowing some reclaimed areas to return to nature. The country exists in negotiation with the sea, constantly pushing boundaries, literally expanding national territory through engineering. It's terraforming in real time. A nation that grows not through conquest, but construction. Old maps become obsolete every decade as coastlines advance. Singaporeans joke that Malaysia and Indonesia are getting smaller as their sand becomes Singapore. It's a country building itself larger, grain by grain, the only nation significantly changing its physical size through human effort rather than natural processes. Earth's geographical poles wander about 10 meters yearly as the planet's mass distribution shifts with melting ice and moving continents. This polar wander, different from magnetic pole movement, represents changes in Earth's rotation axis. As Greenland's ice melts, the pole moves toward Europe. Earthquakes nudge it slightly. Even atmospheric pressure changes cause tiny movements. Since 1900, the pole has wandered about 12 meters. The movement accelerated recently due to climate change, ice loss redistributing Earth's weight. This affects GPS satellites, which must account for the wandering poles. Ancient polar positions are recorded in rocks, showing the poles have wandered thousands of kilometers over geological time. This true polar wander differs from tectonic drift. The whole planet shifts relative to its spin axis. It's like a spinning top gradually changing its balance point. The wander is slow but measurable, Earth adjusting its rotation to accommodate its changing shape. As ice melts and water redistributes, the planet literally rebalances itself. It's a reminder that Earth is dynamic, even in its most fundamental motions, that our planet's spin itself responds to the movement of ice and water on its surface. As we reach the end of our journey tonight, we've traced the quiet stories written in Earth's surface, from lakes that hold ancient secrets, to mountains that grow in darkness, from deserts that sing to forests that create their own weather. We've visited places where water flows uphill, where stones move by themselves, where the ground breathes fire for decades without rest. Geography, as we've seen, isn't just about places on a map. It's about time made visible, about forces so patient they work in millennia, about a planet that's simultaneously permanent and ever-changing. Every formation we've visited tonight continues its slow transformation, even as you drift toward sleep. The Himalayas rising, the Pacific shrinking, the Sahara waiting for its next green period. These 100 glimpses remind us that Earth keeps most of its wonders hidden, beneath ice, under oceans, in places too remote or hostile for casual visits. Yet they exist, patient and enduring, whether we know of them or not. They don't require our observation to be magnificent. Tomorrow, the sun will rise on all these places, each continuing its ancient story. The geographical poles will wander their 10 meters. Iceland will grow its 2 centimeters wider. Somewhere, a new island might emerge from the sea. Thank you for joining me on this gentle exploration of our planet's forgotten corners and quiet mysteries. May these geographical truths follow you into peaceful dreams, where perhaps you'll walk through crystal caves, float in temporary lakes, or stand on mountains older than bones. Until next time, this is Midnight Geography, wishing you a restful night